Good to go.
Good to go.
I don't know what happens on your end, but on my end, when I hit go live, it does like a countdown 3, 2, 1, and then it says go. And then
Yeah, I don't trust that though. I've tried to time. I think it's just like a little bit after that.
Yeah,
at
like
least
a
for
split
YouTube.
second. Yeah.
I missed one of my good to goes once, and I said never again.
The rest of the show probably sucked. It can't be the show can't go well if you missed your good to go.
Yeah. I mean, how else do the fans know that we're getting started?
That's right. They'll just think that we're live. They won't think we're actually doing a show.
God, I love what your hair's doing today. I know it's I know it's just like, oh yeah, I didn't do anything, but it's one of those days where it's just like, oh yeah, I didn't do anything, worked out.
Yeah.
Curly
Good,
hair
I'm glad.
struggles, boys. If you know, you know, and if you don't, you definitely don't. Don't even try.
We definitely need to get a sponsor that does like hair products for men.
Yeah.
That reminds me. This is a go ahead and say what you're going to say. I'll find this.
Oh no,
this
public
tweet.
call. If I find out that Charlemagne is a long-haired boy and use that damn avatar when he was on our show, I will burn Twitter to the ground. I have a sneaking suspicion that Chuck has long hair now.
Okay,
if any of the fans know, please let me know.
My dad sent Amy and I this week. It's a quote from Clement of Alexandria. He said, "But for one who is a man to comb himself and shave himself with a razor for the sake of fine effect, to arrange his hair at the looking glass, to shave his cheeks, pluck hairs out of them and smooth them, how womanly! For this is a meretricious and impious form of snare. For God wished women to be smooth and rejoice in their locks alone growing spontaneously, as a horse in his mane, but has adorned men like the lions with a beard, and endowed him as an attribute of manhood with a shaggy chest, a sign of strength and rule." Yeah. Amy screenshotted it and tweeted it out and said, "This is my kink." So I know that I married well.
That's pretty funny.
Speaking of, I need to tell her to send the link to, actually, I can probably do it myself. Send the link to my mother-in-law because she loves watching us.
It's the only reason that I grow a beard during the winter. Just to show that, just because I can.
just to prove it to yourself?
No, not even to myself. No, that battle was lost long ago, Matthew. No, I'm not. You're in the chat. Come on, buddy. But yeah, no, just to kind of show to these other boys that are just like, oh, maybe I'll try to push out some beard hairs from like my jawline, down to sort of the neck bone.
I can grow. It took me a long time to actually get hair here on my cheeks, and even now, you can tell like it doesn't really do much up above where I have it here. I just got to trim the scragglers off every now and then. Yeah, I can grow just an absolutely majestic neck beard. I can connect it straight down into my chest. Just the whole thing.
We need to get you like a Best Buy golf shirt. Just grow it from the neck down.
Yeah. Give me like some big thick glasses.
Oh God!
What's up, Poppy Libs?
Like an ANCAP, like pendant on your shirt.
Wear like an anarchy ball hat.
Yes. Oh gosh, that'd be so fun.
Cooper and Mark in the chat too. What's up, guys? Kings. That reminds me, if you guys have not joined the supporting listeners group, you are missing out. We have been having some absolutely brilliant, phenomenal conversations in there lately. I woke up this morning to Cooper, and I think his name is Jay from the guy from 2-Bit Podcast. You see him all over Twitter, 2-Bit Podcast. Mm-hmm. The two of them were going back and forth this morning. I couldn't even process it when I woke up. It takes me several, like, I don't know, a couple hours after I wake up before I'm really outside the realm of delirious. And so I could hardly process what they were talking about this morning. But I'd like to say that we talked before about how our chat was always an area on the live stream. The chat was always just a really high level, some really intelligent people talking about good stuff. That has transferred over to the Sporting Listeners group. Mm-hmm. We've got a Discord server in there that's just absolutely hopping. And I just created a new channel as well for guest suggestions. So anybody who's interested in making any guest suggestions for us as we move forward. Well, by the end of the show today, we're gonna talk a little bit about the direction that King Pilled is going to head going forward. And one thing that's going to be included is a lot of guests. So I made a little channel in there for people to submit guest suggestions, and we've got some good names that will be on the way here at some point in the future. So if you want to join, if you want to be a part of that, then you can go to subscribestar.com/kingpilled and sign up there. We've got 3 different tiers. If you want, you can be a peasant. We've got peasants, and we love our peasants. We treat them very well. They're good people. And then we've also got helicopter pilots and warlords. And if you sign up at the warlord, speaking of, Populov just said the last warlord roundtable was excellent. He made it in for that one. We have a warlords roundtable every other Tuesday where we just get together, the several of us, and do a Zoom call. And each time it's been about 3 hours, and it's been some of the craziest conversations that I've ever had on all kinds of esoteric and spiritual and psychedelic and just basically any subject you can imagine, quantum mechanics. We went into all kinds of different stuff this last time again. And it just, I feel like I'm sitting there, all these people, they came because we're the ones who do the show, but I'm sitting there and I feel like I'm the one sitting there learning from everybody else. They're the ones who are bringing their observations and their insights. And it's just it's a real blessing. And it's become, I'll be honest, I look forward to the roundtable more than I look forward to doing the show itself. That's how good it is. So if you guys are interested in something like that, again, just go sign up with the subscribestars.com/kingpilled, and you can join the Discord, and you too can join us for the Warlords Roundtable.
The Trumpians are better than Trump. The Jeffersonians were better than Jefferson, and our supporting listeners are better than us.
Yes, exactly. What would you call it? The king pilled are better than the king king pillars. Yes. King pillars. Oh, there's an interesting. There could be like a double meaning there. King pillars and king pillars. Interesting. Populib says, "Hey Matt, we should bore people to tears next time with the Roman versus Eastern Orthodox concept of the filioque clause and its implications for monarchy. That would be an interesting conversation. I don't think that would bore anybody to tears. I think that the guys in there, I think they would be hopping on that.
Yeah,
unless you're talking about doing it on the show. Doing it on the show, yeah. Once we get this stuff, get these conversations out in front of the plebs, then yeah, they'll probably get bored. But if you self-select and you get into one of these supporting listeners groups, then you're in pretty highfalutin territory there." Jeremiah says, as someone who's dipping their toes back into Christianity, the warlords have been incredibly thought-provoking. I noticed that Jeremiah here is using the their pronoun, so I'm going to assume that Jeremiah is a them there. And given that, I think he's no longer welcome in the in the Discord. Cooper. Cooper says, "Fuck the filioque." Now we're getting into niche Christian doctrine humor. Well, this should be an interesting episode. We've got a few different topics to touch on today, and we are not going to be shying away from the controversy with this one. My expectation is that the loyal core listeners are probably really going to enjoy this conversation. Anybody else who happens to stumble upon it, they may not so much. They may find it rather triggering for any number of reasons. I'd like to think that we've done a good enough job creating an audience or like an attraction that self-selects enough that the people who are going to get triggered by it won't show up in the first place, and they won't violate our echo chamber. But there's always the possibility that you'll have that one guy that comes and gets all triggered. We had him in the comments a couple of times. But we have two different topics here at first that we want to talk about that are going to really directly challenge a lot of the libertarian libertarian dogma, I guess. And it's subjects that I would have had probably the opposite position on a couple of years ago, opposite from the position that I have on it now. But I guess as I keep getting older and having had a son now, and then maybe it's just reading, I don't know what it is, but somehow I keep finding my world expanding more and more, and each time it does, I view the same subject in a different light, and this happens across a whole variety of different subjects. And so today, two of the things that we're going to be taking on are one, the thing that's been tearing apart Liberty Twitter for the last couple of days, which is homelessness. The the good man himself, Tho Bishop, launched a nuke into Liberty Twitter and
You think he
got
did it on
everybody all.
purpose?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. He knows exactly what he's doing. That man knows. That man knows how to direct the conversation. Speaking of, we should be having Mr. Tho Bishop back on the show here again at some point in the next couple of weeks. He's got a very interesting subject he approached us with, and we're going to be talking about. I think he said it's Rothbard and Hoppe's critiques of Burnham, which I'm very interested to hear.
Same.
And so he'll be coming on at some point for that, and then the next sacred cow that we're going to go after today is capitalism, and we're going to be talking about the evils of capitalism. And I think we have a kind of an interesting take on that. And there's a couple of things that I wanted to read related to that. One really good Twitter thread that this guy named Martyr did this last week, and then there's a quote here from G.K. Chesterton, and then at the end of the stream, we're going to talk a little bit about what our plan is going forward with the show, the types of things that we're going to talk about, the subjects, the guests, that sort of thing, and maybe more specifically, the types of things we're not going to talk about. I think that's probably more of the focus here. We both have an idea of what we don't want to spend time talking about anymore. We're getting very, very jaded on it, and it's starting to make doing the show just not all that fun. But I think it'll take a little bit of work on our parts to avoid some of these subjects. But then we also have some stuff that. What's that?
Ways. It's like getting out of a cold pool a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Getting out of a cold pool. That's a good analogy. But then we also have some stuff that we want to talk about, and I'll speak for myself. I have a particular area that I'm very interested in, and which is actually very kind of a wide realm that I'm very interested in. And then Steven has something that has some stuff that he's very interested in, and I'm very interested in the stuff that Steven's interested in and wants to talk about as well. And then I think that he's interested in the stuff that I'm interested in as well. But if he's not, that's fine. I'm fine talking about it on my own. But yeah, so we'll get into that here at the end of the show. See you later, Populibs. Thanks for dropping in for a few minutes here. Okay, so I think first of all, what I'm going to do is let's do this this homelessness thing here first, and then we'll touch on that, and then we'll move forward with the show.
I had to. There's a comment here that the libertarian position of homelessness is not to be, and you'll notice that the camera quality is significantly less than it usually is. And in order to avoid homelessness, I sold my camera. Don't. I'll bounce back. Yes.
You're attempting to avoid being a bum and a vagrant and drawing the ire of Murray Rothbard.
Yes, and if you would like to avoid the same thing, one suggestion I have for you is to join the Nomad Network.
Very well done.
It'd be better if I could keep a straight face when I did it. But sincerely, the reason that I'll be able to sleep tonight, knowing that homelessness is not in my future, in large part is due to the people over at the Nomad Network, which have one in particular, but let's say several have sort of helped make life be a little bit more predictable economically for me. So if you want to head over to www.nomadnetwork.app/king, you can sign up, and there's a large knowledge base that's there for digital entrepreneurs. That's www.nomadnetwork.com/king to join.
Anyway, speaking of capitalism. No, wait. We'll get into capitalism here in a minute. First of all,
we're just getting cooking, folks.
Yeah, we're just starting to pick up here. Carlos, promo code WWW. So for those of you who are unaware, the nuke that our good friend Tho Bishop tossed out this week was, let me see if I can click through these threads here and find it. So Anarchy in Black, which is he's a very interesting guy to follow. I've been following him on Twitter for a little while now, and he's got some very interesting takes. He actually, if you've been on Twitter, sometimes you'll recognize this dynamic where, in order to understand a conversation, sometimes there's like a quote tweet of a quote tweet of a quote tweet of a quote tweet, and you have to get all the way back to the original tweet to figure out what started the conversation, so that you can zoom all the way back out. So, and that's what this is here. So somebody posted a picture of Union Station, and it's very, very just completely open. There's no benches, no seats, no. It's kind of it's not all that accommodating. And he said, "What do you see here? Nothing." Correct. Would it surprise you to learn that the entrance to Union Station used to have benches? They were removed to prevent unhoused people from sitting and resting. Now travelers and others who want to sit cannot. Hostile architecture hurts us all. And so Anarchy in Black, or his name's Marcel Dumas, he says the alternative to hostile architecture is a generous police presence willing and able to drive out vagrants from the area. Roses are red, violets are blue. I wish it didn't be like this. I wish it didn't be like it is. His point being that this so-called hostile architecture, or this building, or this area here, this public space that is not accommodating to homeless people, it's that way because the other alternative is you have cops show up and keep like busting the homeless people and the vagrants and getting them out of there, because nobody wants to go through Union Station and climb over homeless people. Nobody wants to be around vagrancy. It is what it is. So this person who posted the original tweet is complaining that they took all the benches out, and he wants the benches to be back there so that homeless people can sleep on the benches. And so this is one area of analysis, one form of analysis that actually this plagues all of liberalism, but then libertarianism as well, where people will observe a situation, they'll say, I don't like that situation, make it be like it was before. But what they miss is the fact that that other counterfactual cannot exist. It won't exist. It'll result in a third option altogether. And often that third option will be even worse than the existing one. So in this case, this person is saying, we'll put all the benches back there and let the homeless people congregate and sleep there. And that's not going to be a good option. And it's actually going to end up in a worse option, because even worse for the homeless people and everybody around there, even worse than not letting homeless people sleep there, is having cops there policing the area and not letting homeless people sleep there. That's going to create an even worse environment for people. So then Tho, dear sweet Tho, I love this man. He quote tweeted it. He quote tweeted that, and he said, "Take back the architecture, get rid of the bums. Again, unleash the cops to clear the streets of bums and vagrants. Where will they go? Who cares? Hopefully they will disappear." Now that got the ire of basically it was a fantastic left libertarian bait tweet. And in particular, I noticed that it got a hold of Vermin Supreme, and this I almost said a word that would probably get the stream taken down. This special old goofball started reeing about fascism and stuff. And so what's funny here is that a lot of the people that are replying here that are all bent out of shape about Tho are people who were like, well, you're not a libertarian. You can't call yourself a libertarian if you're going to say something like that. And the great irony here is that these are not Tho's words. Well, actually, the architecture was the only word in that tweet that was Tho's original word. He substituted architecture in there. Normally it's streets, because what he's doing is he's quoting from a piece written by Murray Rothbard entitled Right-Wing Populism. I think it was that on LouRockwell.com, it's called Right-Wing Populism. I think that there was a longer name for it when he originally wrote it. I think it was like a program for right-wing populism. So this is something that Mr. Libertarian himself wrote. And as part of that, we're not going to read the whole thing here today. I'll put the link in the description later on, so you guys can go read it if you'd like. But as part of it, he listed 8 different planks that would be part of a right-wing populist program. And 2 of those planks in particular are relevant to the conversation here today. I'll read the other 6 here just to give some context, and then we'll go through the 2 that Tho was referring to. So the other 6 planks are 1, slash taxes, which, yep, libertarians, yeah. Number 2 is slash welfare. Yep, that's good. Number 3 is abolish racial or group privileges. That's where a lot of libertarians are going to start getting a little, but a good number of libertarians will be nodding right along with that. Then there's the 2 that we're going to talk about in a minute. Then the last 3 are abolish the Fed, attack the banksters. Okay, yeah. Number 7, here's where a lot of people are going to fall off. Number 7 is America First. And number 8 is where the majority of people who call themselves libertarians are going to be completely gone. And that is defend family values. So the great thing here is that most people who have read Murray Rothbard, they read 1970s Murray Rothbard. They didn't read 1990s Murray Rothbard. 1990s Murray Rothbard was a very different creature. And I think that sort of that growth in Rothbard's view of the world is instructive. I think a lot of people can learn a lot from that. But so the 2 planks in particular that Tho was referencing here were plank number 4, which is take back the streets, crush criminals. And his little description of it, he says, and by this I mean, of course, not white collar criminals or inside traders, but violent street criminals, robbers, muggers, rapists, and murderers.
Those are the criminals that we don't talk badly about.
Right. Yeah. Those are the poor victims. Those are the people who have been victimized by society, and we need to engage in libertarian outreach with them. He says cops must be unleashed and allowed to administer instant punishment, subject, of course, to liability when they are in error. That's the phrase there that really just gets people's panties in a wad. The fact that a so-called libertarian would say cops must be unleashed and allowed to administer instant punishment. And he says subject, of course, to liability when they're in error. So he's not saying that cops should be allowed to do whatever they want, but cops should be there to do the job of cops. And then this is the one that Tho was directly referencing. It was plank number 5. It's take back the streets, get rid of the bums. Again, unleash the cops to clear the streets of bums and vagrants. Where will they go? Who cares? Hopefully they'll disappear. That is, move from the ranks of the petted and cosseted bum class to the ranks of the productive members of society. This is Rothbard at his most based, to borrow the term. And the general response to this among your rank and file libertarians, which are ultimately what they're doing is if you've studied mass movements at all, you'll recognize that this sort of knee-jerk emotional response to something that Tho said like this from all these little people that are fussing around in his mentions, ultimately they're the ones who are going to be the most aggressive in their activism, and they're the ones who are going to direct the momentum of the movement. That's just especially if your movement is built around like tolerance or egalitarianism or freedom or any sort of thing like that, your movement is going to be directed by the types of people who are getting their panties in a wad about Tho Bishop. So Tho tweeted that out, and our very good friend Dave Smith, he came through with some great takes here. So he quote tweeted Tho. He says, Tho triggered a lot of people with this one, and I think that was intentional, but it does raise an interesting point. Reject Rothbard's position if you'd like. Of course, Dave's a smart guy. He recognizes that Tho is quoting Rothbard, whereas all these other people are like, you can't be a libertarian and say these sorts of things, when it was Mr. Libertarian himself who Tho is quoting. Dave says, reject Rothbard's position if you'd like, but what exactly is the solution that other libertarians are offering? So here again, Dave is really getting at the heart of this. People are all bent out of shape about someone proposing a solution, but nobody else is actually proposing a solution. Or if they are proposing one, it's something that's entirely unfeasible. This is not a situation where you need tolerance and compassion and just acknowledging. I mean, you need compassion. I'm not saying you don't need compassion, but not compassion the way that it manifests with most people. Having bums and vagrants around in your streets is not something that needs to be tolerated. There's nothing liberty about that. There's nothing libertarian about it. And ultimately, there's nothing civilized about it. It's completely uncivilized. There's a reason that having a whole bunch of bums and homeless people around in your city is heavily correlated with crime. And this is one of our main critiques of libertarians, not libertarianism per se, but libertarians, is that they are suspiciously blind to some of the greatest violations of property rights in society, broadly speaking, today, which is private actors violating property rights, crime, violent crime, like the other plank that Rothbard had, which is all the muggers, robbers, rapists, murderers. Just get rid of them. Get rid of them. Eliminate them. And if that means you're endorsing police, which are, they're not libertarian because they're part of the state, so be it. As a libertarian, from Rothbard's perspective, supporting liberty means opposing violations of liberty, whether they come from the from the state or from private actors. The person who really opened both of our eyes on this, I think, or really put words to it, was Moldbug. This is one of the big points that he makes, that if you treat liberty as something that is concordant with either order or chaos, and it doesn't matter, then you're not going to get liberty. Liberty is only a consequence of order. You must first establish order. And establishing order is not going to be soft and fuzzy, and it's not going to be something that some rainbow flag hippie on Twitter is going to be a fan of. So if you're falling on that side of people, if you're advocating for or throwing your lot in with those people, and yet you're claiming that your goal is some sort of peaceful society that's peaceful and harmonious and property rights are absolutely respected, you're an incoherent schizophrenic.
Speaking of which, as someone who lives around a bunch of incoherent schizophrenics, there's not a lot of liberty at certain hours of the night. And it's not because of the state. It's not because I'm being harassed by police. It's because of incoherent schizophrenics, like quite literally. And I'd like to take this opportunity, just for if there's any big fans of Dave Smith, that somehow stumble upon this. I'd just like to let you know that your good buddy Dave. We have our disagreements here on the King Pill Show, with Dave
the real
Smith.
King Pill Show,
the real King Pill Show, starring Stephen Messina, with Dave Smith and Matthew Erickson on the YouTube network. We have our disagreements, but Dave's a fundamentally pretty based guy.
Yes.
And if you watched his last live stream, just to give you an idea, he name dropped a few people, and read some really smart tweets from some people, and surprise ending, it's me. All right, so that's the kind of guy that your friend Dave Smith is in line with, is what I'm trying to tell you. So I'm here to break your heart, basically.
Uncle Stevie Boy is based.
That's right.
To continue Dave's thread here, he said the reality right now is that homelessness is a major problem. Massive homeless encampments are making major cities around the country unlivable. Is it really the libertarian answer, or an adult one, to say just let them? The problem libertarians have here is that the government doing nothing is the government doing something. Let me say that again. The problem libertarians have here is that the government doing nothing is the government doing something. That observation right there, I want Dave to take that observation and apply it in a whole bunch of other areas too, because that is a absolutely brilliant summation. The government doing nothing is the government doing something, because of the nature of the state being the ultimate functional operator of sovereignty in society. If the government doesn't do something, that's the same thing as the government doing something. If we're going to be robbed and taxed for services, then we want the government to provide those services. Now, obviously, we would prefer to not be robbed and taxed for those services. We'd rather have our voluntary thing that we want, that provides just the exact customized service that we want. But while that's not an option, yes, we want the government to do the thing that it says it's going to do. I want the government clearing bums and vagrants out of the streets, because that's what they're robbing me ostensibly to do. There's multiple different options here, and the worst of them is have the government rob you and not do its job. You can have the government rob you and do its job, and that's a good thing. You can have the government not rob you and not do its job, and sure, that's fine. You can have the government not rob you and do its job, and that would be the best option. But the second best option is have the government rob you and do its job. What we're getting is we're getting the worst of all, which is have the government rob you and not do its job. So by advocating for the government to do its job, in spite of the fact that it's robbing or because it's robbing you, that's not saying that the government should be the only one that does this job or that it's the best form of government imaginable. We still have to deal with the actual world that we live in today. We have to actually deal with reality. So to continue Dave's tweet, he says, so I'll read it one more time. The problem libertarians have here is that the government doing nothing is the government doing something. It's forcing the taxpayers to subsidize areas for homeless people and in the worst way. It doesn't help them. It just forces kids to grow up around mentally ill drug addicts. Now, I know that in this particular case here with Dave, given his career and everything, he's somewhat bound to an urban area. I think eventually there comes a point where it behooves you that if you don't want your kid growing up around mentally ill drug addicts, then irrespective of your career, you have to go somewhere else. You have to leave. You have to get out away from them. And that's his business. He'll take care of that when the time's right. And I trust him to know to do what's right with his family. But I'll say this. Anybody else, almost as a rule, get out of urban areas. Just leave. You're not going to solve these problems. These problems are not solvable right now in these major urban areas. And these are problems that are largely restricted to the major urban areas. You don't get these sorts of problems if you get outside. You don't go into rural areas and have homeless people walking around. That's like almost unheard of. And especially in red states. So if you really have a problem with being around this, then you've got to find some way to get away from the areas that have all of the risk factors for a city a city filled up with mentally ill drug addicts roaming around and potentially threatening your children. Then Captain Lulbert himself, Jack Lloyd, said, quote, subsidized area for homeless people. Bruh, if it's a public property, then government is fostering an illusion that it can maintain a commons. Privatization is the ethical solution. State force against people who hurt no other discrete human is not. And Dave said, I don't understand why some libertarians have so much trouble with this stuff. Privatization is ideal, but if there is a public playground, I'd prefer it not be filled with homeless drug addicts when I bring my daughter there. That if you hear that tweet and your response is some kind of Lulbert reeing, then I want nothing to do with you, because this is a very real, this is a real person talking about a real life experience where he wants to take his child to a playground to play on a playground that's designed for children to play on it. And in doing that, he has to encounter a bunch of homeless bums trying to sleep in the slides. No, this is not, libertarianism does not mean tolerate homeless bums sleeping in slides because using state force against them is totalitarian. If using state force against homeless bums and slides is totalitarian, then call me a totalitarian. Yeah, it sucks that people are homeless, and people should be doing something about the actual causes of people being homeless. Some of that's the state, some of it's not. The state is ultimately downstream from other issues that are causing that. And if you really care about the homeless issue, you won't go after people who are trying to accommodate or trying to live their lives around it and blame them for trying to use the state. You'll actually go to the source and work on preventing people from becoming homeless in the first place, which may entail going after the war on drugs. And that doesn't mean going and campaigning and activisting against the war on drugs. It means going and helping people who have been hurt by the war on drugs. You're not going to be able to solve all of it, but you can solve some of it. You can help somebody. And go do that. Go help somebody. Don't try to solve all the world's problems and just say, well, you can't help anyone until you're helping everyone. That's a key plank in the liberal mind. which is that we have to solve problems universally. We have to help everyone all at the same time. There has to be a perfect solution, and if it's not perfect, then we're just going to sit around and complain. And that's nowhere is that seen more in more concentrated fashion than within libertarian circles, because libertarians are ultimately hyper liberals. Libertarians have taken liberalism to its ultimate extent. And their complaint with everybody else is that everybody else isn't liberal enough. When really, liberalism is the source of these issues. It's not the cure. Liberalizing more isn't going to make these issues go away. These issues are a product of liberalism, which is ultimately a demonic manifestation of the spirit of Antichrist. Cooper says the state simply existing doesn't make one a homeless crackhead with schizophrenia. Yeah, there you go. All right. So I think that was the gist of that particular thing. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about it, Stephen?
I just love Tho, and I love Dave, and I love when they're on the same page.
So apparently Tho went on Part of the Problem yesterday. Have you listened to it yet?
I have not.
I would very much like to. I need to go do that. I'll be honest, I haven't listened to an episode of Part of the Problem in a while, but I'm definitely going to tune in for this one.
Again, he had a really good one where he went through a tweet by Stephen Messina and sort of just mentioned how brilliant it was about 3 times during the live stream. And I think the fans really need to listen to that.
Juan here wants to know what's up with your beard. Are you returned to monk?
Turn to monk?
Yeah.
Is that a specific reference or a general reference? It's a strong beard. I like that we got compared to Mesopotamians and Byzantines and the whole bit. I just watched a little documentary on Netflix docuseries about the Ottomans taking over Rome, which, man, had me very sort of had my genetics all culturally conflicted. It's just like, damn it! I thought I was from those guys, but I look a lot like those guys who just Oh, I get it. I got it. I got you.
You are a product of colonizers multiple times over.
Yeah.
You're a product of the colonizers who colonized the colonizers.
Yeah, it was funny being in Italy and having not a single person speak Italian to me the entire time that I was there. They just spoke Spanish and Portuguese and like all this shit. And then when I went to Sicily, they all spoke just like the South in general. They started speaking Italian to me, but like I was in Rome, there's nothing. Pretty funny.
Speaking of foreign languages, this morning while I was listening to my morning prayers on my walk with my dog, I started. So the local Orthodox church here that we've been attending is an Antiochian Orthodox church, which is Arabic. That's ultimately Antioch is more of an Arabic tradition, and so at during the divine liturgy, the majority of it is in English, but then I'd say probably like 80%, maybe like 75% English, and then maybe 15% Greek and 10% Arabic. And every time I hear the Arabic, it just it perks my ears right up. I just love hearing it. I love the sound of the whole experience of hearing Arabic and being within such an ornate kind of like legendary masterpiece of a building. It's that in and of itself, leaving aside the content, that in and of itself is really profoundly spiritual. And it reminds me a lot of when I spent 2 weeks in Turkey right after high school. And I just loved every night or every morning. I loved waking up and hearing the call to prayer first thing. And I just thought it was just such a cool experience. I imagine what it was. I think I brought this up on the Warlords Roundtable, and one of the guys said, imagine like with our society today. I think it was Cooper. He said, imagine with our society today, if like 5 times a day there was loudspeakers all around town that all blasted out a message saying, all right, everyone, drop what you're doing and get down and pray. And just like think about the effects that would have on society and on keeping your mind fixed in a heavenly direction. It was a cool experience. So this morning, as I was doing my walk, I was looking up. I actually found the St. John Chrysostom's Divine Liturgy in Arabic and was listening to it, and it was just straight goosebumps the whole time. And I kind of I might try to learn Arabic or something. I want to learn one of these old traditional languages, because I think that there's a lot of power in the language itself, and particularly in the actual sounds of the language. I think English is a very messy, sickly kind of language. It doesn't. It's very degenerated or degraded. And I'd imagine even like modern Arabic speakers are probably largely their Arabic that they speak is probably suffering from a lot of the same things, like most people in society today.
Fucking Carlos.
But that was another thing we talked about in one of the roundtables a couple weeks ago. Is have you ever seen if they'll take water, like a pool of water or something like that, and they will take a speaker and they'll direct the sound waves of different words at the water, and the sound of the word creates different shapes in the water. And so some of the more esoteric theories is that the words, the actual sound waves of the words themselves change the world around you. They change the physical world around you because they create different sound waves, different frequencies, that sort of thing. And so there's actual literal physical transformative power in specific words because of the actual sound waves that are associated with them. And so I've wondered before if there's like a legitimate case then for for example, only performing liturgical services in older languages for that reason. I would be very open to that being the case. And then if that's the case also, then there would be power in learning those languages and actually speaking them and training your mouth to make those sounds, and then experiencing your body experiencing the sound waves of you making and hearing those sounds. All those are these are the sorts of things that we talk about in the Warlords Roundtable. So if you'd like to hear more about that kind of thing, then go sign up, subscribestar.com/kingpilled.
Well, I mean, I think it's a transformative thing to speak a different language anyway. I know that when I was in a circumstance where I was speaking a lot of Spanish, like to somebody, like that's the only thing that we communicated in was Spanish. And it was like to put it mildly would be to say that I was thinking differently. I found myself like thinking differently. And then if I wanted to be a little dramatic, I was kind of a different person. You know what I mean? Just like there's the way that your thoughts have to form, you're being very like mindful of like, putting stuff together. Yeah, it felt like totally different, and just sort of the way that your movements are, and just because the way that you're expressing yourself, you feel things change. So I'm sure that there's something to the idea of of speaking those language, if that's what you're like trying to embody,
There was the most recent episode of Lord of Spirits that just came out yesterday is about the word of the Lord in the Bible, the phrase "the word of the Lord," which spoiler alert is a reference to Christ. They as part of the episode, right toward the end, they spent a long stretch going through the first chapter of the Gospel of St. John, and where he talks about the word, and they were breaking down the Greek there. And one of the things that was really interesting to me that I'd never known, I don't know anything about Greek, is that the way that verbs are tensed in Greek, and I don't know if this is like modern Greek as well, or if this is just ancient Greek. I wasn't paying that close of attention, but the way in English, and I think most Romantic languages, the way that verbs are tensed has a temporal dynamic to it. So there's like past tense, present tense, future tense, and that's the way that our verbs work. In Greek, apparently, there's a difference to it. Like sometimes there can be a temporal like aspect to it, but a major part of it is like the significance of the thing. So if something is like small and insignificant, it gets one tense, or if it's larger and more significant, it's a different tense. And just that sort of thing I started thinking about related to what you were saying, that speaking a language that's structured that way, there's got to be like a meta-linguistic effect where the structure of your language will change the way that you view the world, because you're forced to think about concepts in a different way. And so then, in the same sense, then if you're reading another language and you're trying to just translate it directly to your language, if you're not aware of those things, you're gonna mistranslate it, and there's gonna be stuff that gets lost in that translation. One point that they made over and over and over again is that you cannot translate without interpreting. There's no such thing as a neutral translation. It will always involve some form of interpretation, because languages are not equivalent. You can't just make an equal comparison from one language to the other. They evolve differently. This sort of thing is just absolutely profoundly fascinating to me. And just as a sneak peek to what we'll talk about at the end of the show here, that's the kind of thing that I'm very much interested in like ancient languages and ancient documents, and how those sorts of what sorts of things have been lost in translation from ancient civilizations or even less ancient civilizations. Just those sorts of things that we just wind up not being aware of because of having, like, I guess, like too simplistic of a view of the world. It's got some good comments here. Let me read through these real quick, and then I'm going to read a quote.
Yeah, Natasha sounds nuts. I love it. Said that the English language is designed to cast spells. I love it.
I am very much down for that theory.
Yeah.
She says, I took Spanish in 7th and 8th grade, but was never fluent. That makes sense. This makes me want to learn another language or relearn Spanish. I've been contemplating that recently. Okay, Cooper says it applies in modern Greek too. Okay, so that's good to know. I was actually moderately fluent in Spanish when I was kind of around the same age. I went on a couple of mission trips. I did one to El Salvador when I was 14 and spent a couple of weeks there. And my dad had spoken a little bit of Spanish, so I always was like, oh, I want to be like my dad and I want to learn Spanish. So I'd become pretty familiar with it before I went down there. And being immersed in it, I just picked it up really fast. Mm-hmm. There's something about with the Ericksons, my whole Erickson extended family, we all talk about language, and we love digging into like some of the most inane things about linguistics and stuff. So I guess my mind kind of naturally attaches itself to languages. And I've said before that if I get around someone with an accent, I'll pick it up before long. I mean, if we move to Texas and I'm around a bunch of people with a Southern accent, I guarantee you that I'll pick up a Southern accent completely subconsciously. It won't even be, won't be conscious. I just start mirroring people who are around me. So then I went in high school, I did another mission trip, went down to Mexico for about 10 days, I think, and picked it. It's like everything started coming right back again to the point where I could almost like translate for people. And then the last trip I did, I went to Guatemala for about 2.5 weeks. And I was part of the orchestra and the choir in my high school. And so we went and did a music tour down there. And again, as soon as I got down there, everything just came back again. And I just pick it up really fast. But if every time I've kind of tried to learn it or tried to expose myself to it, I took a couple quarters of it in college. I just couldn't get it. I couldn't get it just being around a bunch of Americans speaking Spanish. I had to be around Spanish speaking people speaking Spanish.
Yo también hablo español con fluidez. Okay, that's it. That's how you get it.
El rock negro.
That's how you get it. It's one of my best clients, guys.
That's an inside joke. If anybody who's watched the show for a long time or has been in the supporting listeners group, you'll get that one.
Nope.
Juan says, if your native language is English, easiest languages for you will be Dutch by a long margin. Yeah, I believe that. Listening to Dutch, if you just sort of like,
you start understanding it.
Yeah, if you do whatever the auditory equivalent of just kind of like letting your eyes sort of go out of focus, if you do that with your ears and you listen to Dutch, you'll think that you're listening to English. The patterns, the meter of it and everything are very, very similar. And then German, and then maybe French or Spanish. Yeah. My little sister has become very fluent in German, and she sends me, there's this I think it's like someone on Instagram or something like that does a bunch of goofy jokes about different languages and stuff. And one of the ones that they do is they take a specific word and they have all these different countries that have these different languages speak their version of the word, and they're all very, very similar. And then you get German, and German is like, it just has no bearing whatsoever on all the other languages. Again, this is, weird linguistics humor always gets me. So if you want to get on my good side, then give me some weird linguistics humor.
If you want to get on my good side, I just photoshopped a picture of Tho as Travis Bickle and replied to it. And it's not getting anything. It's getting a complete fucking zero.
You tweeted it?
I replied to his thing. I don't know. It's not a big deal. It's fine.
Hold on. I'm going to go see if I can give it a little exposure here.
Oh, shit.
Oh, my God. Oh, that's so good here. Let me throw that one in the chat for our good people. There we go. Man, we've got some real real linguists in here.
I was gonna say, this is the humble brag linguistics edition of the whole show.
Yeah,
Arabic was real hard for me, but anyway.
Man, yeah, I'm reading through some of these here. Amy said, I'm behind, but some homeless adjacent guy offered Eastwood a toy from his van at the library the other day. I almost had to kill a man with my bare hands. Yeah, it makes me less. I've told Amy for a long time that libraries are communism, and she doesn't like it when I tell her, but maybe one of these days she'll come around.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos says Matt was already dancing cumbias after 2 Modelos here in San Antonio. Hey man, you got to keep that stuff to yourself. You can't be airing me out.
Yeah, I will dance cumbia if I ever get down to go see Carlos. No problemo.
Yeah, you're actually qualified.
Get me some pointy boots. If I can borrow some, if you got somebody who's got not tiny feet, I'm down.
What size shoe do you wear?
Like 11.5, 12.
Huh. How tall are you? I guess I didn't even know that.
I don't know anymore.
Yeah,
I've gotten measured for I've gotten measured, and it always comes out 72.5 inches.
So 6.5.
But no one would ever think that. Like, looking at me,
you
like,
slouch.
No one would. Maybe, I don't know, but yeah.
You're about. I guess we're about the same. We're about the same height again. Then I think. I think I'm like 6.5, 6'1", something like that. I've got gigantic feet though. I wear like a 13 or a 14.
Good for you, Amy.
Which is not fun. It's a pain. This is getting into this is the type of stuff I'm interested in. KT Aggie 10 said Matt should get this with the different names for God the Father: Yahweh, Jehovah Jireh, El Elohim. English loses the different natures of God, removing his titles. Yeah, that's another little sneak peek toward the end of the show. This is the kind of stuff that is of great interest to me. Okay. I'm getting bogged down in all these comments because they're very interesting, but I'm gonna have to come back through and read these later on. We got to get the show on the road. So as we transition into our next subject here, we're gonna do we got to tell you about one of our beloved sponsors. But first, I wanted to read you guys a quote. And this quote is from one of my favorite quote making people ever, and that is G.K. Chesterton. And he said, "It cannot be too often repeated that what destroyed the family in the modern world was capitalism. No doubt it might have been communism, if communism had ever had a chance, outside that semi-Mongolian wilderness where it actually flourishes. But so far as we are concerned, what has broken up households and encouraged divorces and treated the old domestic virtues with more and more open contempt is the epoch and power of capitalism. It is capitalism that has forced a moral feud and a commercial competition between the sexes. And above all, that has encouraged, for commercial reasons, a parade of publicity and garish novelty, which is in its nature the death of all that was called dignity and modesty by our mothers and fathers." G.K. Chesterton, this is 1935. That I saw that the other day in this thread here that I'm going to read, and I just I love basically everything that G.K. Chesterton has to say. I've never heard him say anything that I didn't like. I love his Chesterton's Fence is a great little what's the word I'm looking for here? Like an aphorism. Don't tear down a fence unless you know why it was built. But yeah, so we have some comments here on capitalism. But first of all, before we do that, our good friend Steven's going to tell us about
If capitalism has you stressed out, why don't you go on over to palomaverdecbd.com. Just chill the fuck out. Our good friends Carlos and Vanessa have put together an incredible line of CBD products just to cool your shit out if you are stressed about how capitalism has ruined the family unit, the values of our country, and just maybe what it portends for a kind of a bleak future. You can calm your ass down in green apple flavored gummies or strawberry lemonade. And be sure, of course, to use promo code KING at checkout. That's palomaverdecbd.com. Use promo code KING for 25% off of your order.
And just to put a really fine point on this, if you do that, then you will be supporting this show and enabling us to make money off of providing value for you as we tell you about the evils of capitalism.
Yes.
All right.
In case that wasn't, I don't know. We're just like, our listeners are so smart. It's just like,
we have to explain every joke. Okay, so this is where I think we're going to start losing people, but that's fine because I want smart people listening to us. So there's this guy named Martyr Made on Twitter. Martyr, like a Christian martyr, and Made, like created, MADE. And he is the host of the Martyr Made podcast and the co-host of The Unraveling with Jocko Willink. And this is the second or third time that I've seen just an absolutely epic thread from him. I don't know anything about him. I don't know who he is. I don't know what his deal is, but he is on the short list for someone to try to get as a guest on the show because I want to pick his brain. I want to know where he's coming from, because this is what he's explaining here in this thread is really, I think it's an idea that I've tried to get across before in like tweeting about stuff, and then we've talked about it here on the show. We talked about BlackRock before, and BlackRock and the Fed, and
es la verdad. Escúchame, óyeme bien. Puta madre.
How do you say World Economic Forum in Spanish? Klaus Schwab.
WEF. All right, I'm done. That's it.
I think the way that you say Klaus Schwab is hijo de puta. Cooper said capitalism ruined women. Build back burqas. Yeah, Amy. I'm becoming a fan of burqas. That'll be news to her. Okay, so let's see. We got to do another little like quote tweets and quote tweets. What's that?
I think it's a response to how do you say World Economic Forum. He said La Migra.
We need to get Carlos on here sometime. We need to pick his brain. That guy's he has a very interesting view of the world, and I like it a lot. We talked when we were down in San Antonio over some Modelos and some U.S. soccer, and had a very, very good time. So yeah, we'll definitely have him on here at some point. Okay, so Jesse Kelly had a thread here, which you know what? I'll just read Jesse's thread too, because I actually I think I understand what he's saying, and I think he's making a good point. And then the Martyr Made guy is sort of challenging what he's saying, but I think ultimately they largely agree on a lot. So Jesse said, if you'd like to know why statues matter to the communists and why you shouldn't grab your ankles when they point out a military base named after a Confederate general, do some reading on Mao's Cultural Revolution. It will explain why they do it. Hint, it's not about slavery. Communists destroy the history of a nation. Lenin did it. Stalin mastered it. Mao was fanatical about it. But why? What sense does it make? A statue of Robert E. Lee, a statue of Jefferson, Fort Bragg. What do they get out of it? Communism is a religion that believes the entire world is evil and out of order. So its first step, which they never get past, is destroying everything. Then it can be rebuilt into this perfect workers' paradise. But the communist is not stupid. He knows you won't stand for him just showing up at your door and burning your house down. You like your house. You'd never go for that. So the communist will instead do two things: make you dislike your house, quote, your house is evil and racist, or disconnect you from your house. That's why they remove statues. It's like him going in your home and removing all the family pictures and personal touches. Once you've lost any affinity for your house and any mooring to it, then you'll let him burn it down as he sees fit. That's why they destroy our history. Oh, they'll wail and whine about racism and slavery and the Confederacy, but that's not why. Mao, when he was tearing through China, he talked about how important it was for the youth, college kids, to destroy, quote, the four olds. They even wrecked the Buddhist temples. Of course, this was all just to help Mao regain power. You're seeing a softer version of exactly that today, and for the exact same reason. It's happening right before your eyes. So the next time some communist appeals to your northerner sensibilities and talks about wrecking a Confederate monument, try to be smarter than a bowl of dog food. He doesn't want to destroy the Confederacy. He wants to destroy you. That's all. And I think he's exactly right with this. I think his assessment is accurate. That is the motivation of the communists.
Who's this saying this?
Jesse Kelly.
Okay.
However, there's something deeper at play here, and that's what the Martyr Maid guy gets at. I just wanted to mention here that this part where he talked about in China them wrecking Buddhist temples and everything like that. It hurts my soul to see and hear about that kind of thing happening. Where like when ISIS was destroying stuff in Syria, like old cathedrals and old ruins, because they're associated with different religious traditions. Because that's like ancient monuments and buildings and ancient civilizations and cultures and stuff. That's just so profoundly fascinating to me. And part of what this is, again, another little forecast for what we're going to talk about here at the end of the show. One of the things that's most interesting to me is like lost narratives or lost stories of history. And any like this is something that's happened so many times, having a one culture attempting to wipe out a competitive culture, and they go through and destroy their monuments or destroy their libraries or destroy their cultural areas. And I like, even when those cultural things are bad, I still think that there's something that's lost when that thing is destroyed. You lose an object lesson or something that helps you understand your own history. The best way, we've talked before about how generations pass down knowledge through traditions and through rituals. So the best way to destroy a people is to cut them off from their history, to cut them off from their traditions and their rituals, and force them to define themselves by new traditions, by new rituals. In the something I've come across a lot studying orthodoxy, and especially in listening to Lord of Spirits and listening to some other orthodox materials, they talk about how in the time, like say Old Testament period, they didn't have a conception of ethnicity. Today we have, this is something we kind of take for granted. This goes back to the whole conversation about languages and different languages conveying different ideas. The way that people groups were identified and identified themselves at that time was by the rituals that they participated in. Today, this actually still remains the same. Like if you want to become an American, then you have to participate in a series of rituals. You have to do it like the citizenship test. That's a ritual. Getting a passport. That's a ritual. Displaying that passport when you come up to an official document or an official document checking station. That's another example of a ritual, or like saying or doing the national anthem or the Pledge of Allegiance. All of these are rituals that identify someone as a member of a group. In this is a subject that I want to talk about more in the future, but just as another example, in the Old Testament, when there's talk of the Israelites being sent to annihilate different people groups, the way that's often understood is that they engaged in mass genocide. And this is where where you get the narrative that the Old Testament God was this evil, ruthless, authoritarian tyrant, and then the New Testament God was a bunch of lollipops and rainbows. And what gets kind of lost in translation there is that the people group was identified by it was identified as the group of people who all participated in this specific ritual. So there's particular rituals, particular pagan rituals that identified that group, like say, for example, the Amalekites. If you wanted to know who was an Amalekite, you found out who was participating in the Amalekite rituals. So if you wanted to eliminate that tribe, you could do it two ways. You could murder everyone who was in that tribe, or you could abolish the practice of those rituals. If you took everybody who was in that tribe and they all converted to the they all converted to a different religion. We'll just say that. If they all converted to a different religion, then or a different practice of rituals, then that tribe would no longer exist. The people would be alive and they would still exist, but now they have different ritual practices. So that original tribe no longer exists. And this is what was happening in the Old Testament. So if you want to destroy a people, you don't have to kill them. You just have to separate them from their traditions. So that's what is happening here. That's what all of this is being done by the people who are tearing down statues, who are trying to rewrite history, who are trying to force different forms of literature and that sort of thing. And you can't. This is where liberalism will ultimately serves as a vehicle of the demise of the liberals, the people who are like the true believers in liberalism, the classical liberals. They ultimately facilitate their own demise because they treat these sort of things like it can just be a vacuum. Like, oh, we can just have this melting pot where everybody all has their own beliefs and they all practice their own rituals and we can all just exist in peace and harmony together. It's never going to happen. It's never going to work because inevitably an ideology will arise that will not live peaceably with everybody else. And their ritual requires them to destroy other people's rituals. And of course, if the rules of the area are liberal, then they're going to try to perform their destructive rituals under a liberal pretense, because that's what's going to immunize them from being stopped or combated or defended against by liberals. So liberalism is ultimately a Trojan horse, and that's what we're seeing today. Is people are actively destroying the livelihoods and the traditions and the cultures of people within Western society under the pretense of trying to be uber liberals. This is part of our criticism of liberalism in general. But okay, so do you have anything you wanted to say with regard to that? Okay, so let's get to this thread. I got to try to speed this up because I know that Stevie Boy here has to peace out shortly. How much more time do you have?
I'm good.
Okay. So Martyr Made quote tweeted that Jesse Kelly tweet, and he said, conservatives are eventually going to have to grapple with the fact that it's not communists, but hyper-capitalists who are pushing and enabling our destructive cultural revolution. Google and BlackRock are not communist. Bill Gates is not a communist. The celebrities wouldn't know Marx if you brought him to breakfast. The foot soldiers of the revolution are people of relatively higher socioeconomic status who look with undisguised contempt on those below them. What did capitalism mean by this? Capitalism and communism both reduce human beings to a labor commodity. This is the essence of his whole thread. Capitalism and communism both reduce human beings to a labor commodity, to cogs in an economic machine whose value is measured in terms of work and consumption. This is the end of individualism. This is the end of liberalism. The entire purpose, the entire reason that these schools of thought were conceptualized in the first place was toward this end. These were liberalism was an aristocratic, mercantilist ideology that was developed. The principles of liberalism were developed by the aristocratic mercantilist class as a way of undermining established societal institutions by spreading this notion. And these people were true believers. I'm not saying that they were necessarily doing this deliberately to be subversive, although that's definitely the case as well. But this was their motivation. Their motivation was undermining the collective social belief in the existing structures so that they could be torn down. Structures like the crown and the church, so they could be torn down and undermined and replaced by, quote, the market. This is the entire reason for conceptualizing of the individual and trying to teach people to act and see themselves as atomized individuals, because it ultimately reduces human beings to a labor commodity. So those who control the flow and the practice of labor benefit the most from it. And those just happen to be the people who are conceptualizing of it. Imagine that Amazon, this is back to the thread. Imagine that Amazon continues to grow and eventually swallows all retail. It becomes so big that any disruptions cause huge economic dislocations. It's too big to fail, meriting bailouts, but important enough to be strictly regulated. Amazon will essentially have merged with government. Its army of lawyers meet daily with the government's army of lawyers, making sure the company is compliant and working in the national interest. You could call it the Federal Logistics Department without losing meaning. Imagine that the same thing happens in other industries. Big tech becomes the Ministry of Information. Sure, there are sub-ministries, the Facebook Bureau, the Google Department, etc., but they are monopolies regulated, but also protected, by state power. The end state of ungoverned capitalism is monopoly in every significant industry, each of which is too big to fail. That is, every industry run as a pseudo-government agency, as finance has been for many years. Where does that leave you? Well, in Moscow, circa 1976 or so. The gambit here is that if you don't govern the capitalist organizations, then you'll wind up with monopoly in every significant industry and have a de facto fascist / communist / capitalist state. If you do govern it, you'll wind up in the exact same place. This is the key of the entire liberal project. To continue, when people are reduced to economic units, their local preferences, customs, and quirks, or culture, become an impediment to the smooth flow of capital and labor. Think what a pain it is for McDonald's that 1.2 billion Indians don't eat beef. They'd eliminate Hinduism tomorrow if they could. Mass production requires consumers with similar preferences. Local culture is an inefficiency. People who love their hometown or living near extended family are not eager to move for a new job, inhibiting the efficient deployment of human capital. This is where libertarians, especially, and conservatives, when they're so ideologically married to capitalism that they hear this and they say, "Oh no, this is government. This is government's fault. Government did all this. It's not the companies. Well, we believe in a free market. We want everything free. We want people just be free to voluntarily associate. We just want to have a free market. The government shouldn't be involved at all. They're the ones that mess everything up." Where does the government come from? The government doesn't just sprout out of the ether. The government is produced by the interests that are seeking the capitalist interests that are seeking to expand their own horizons, and they're coming up with a justification to whittle down and eliminate the cultural institutions that stand in the way of them expanding their own businesses. Ultimately, the state is just a tool that's being used by the capitalist interests. So focusing on the state is focusing on the tool, not the person who's wielding it. The problem isn't the tool, the problem is the wielder of the tool. Capitalism needs consumers with homogenous tastes, or no culture, and workers with no local or family ties. It wants this globally because borders disrupt the efficient flow of capital and labor. The Chamber of Commerce doesn't push open borders out of concern for the Mexican poor. The end state of the perfect capitalist system is an economy government or is an economy governed by too big to fail pseudo-government monopolies and a homogenous population whose mobility is not inhibited by annoying sentimentality regarding family, locality, or tradition. In other words, communism. You say that one more time. The end state of the perfect capitalist system is an economy governed by too big to fail pseudo-government monopolies and a homogenous population whose mobility is not inhibited by annoying sentimentality regarding family, locality, or tradition. In other words, communism. The communists were explicitly hostile to the annoying sentimentality regarding family, locality, or tradition. They explicitly attack it, like Jesse Kelly pointed out. They explicitly go after it. The capitalist side undermines it subversively, but both ideologies are headed the same direction. You might call them two wings of the same bird. A primary difference, of course, is that capitalism tends to get there with the carrot, while communism gets there with the stick. That was what I was just saying. But they're going to the same place because their theory of man, as primarily a consumer and labor unit, is the same. This is why I've been harping on individualism lately. Because by seeing yourself as an individual and espousing individualism and promoting individualism, you're paving the road for these phenomena. You're paving the road for these sorts of ideologies. They want the people who are seeking your destruction, whether you are a communist who sees the corporations as the enemy, or whether you're a libertarian who sees the state as the enemy. In either case, they both want you to see yourself as an individual. Because when you see yourself as an individual, you divorce yourself from your culture. You divorce yourself from your family. You divorce yourself from your community. And when you do that, you disempower yourself and prevent your communities from being able to withstand this sort of subversion and undermining. He says, but capitalism doesn't have to use the carrot, and it knows how to use the stick. Simply resist the annihilation of your hometown traditions, beliefs, or family structure too vigorously, and you'll find out all about the stick. None of this is a criticism of markets. Market price signals are necessary for an economy to function at all. But just as monarchism means rule by monarch and communism means rule by the Communist Party, capitalism means rule by capital. And we should not be ruled by capital. And let me see if the rest of this. He started replying to some people who were replying to him. Someone said disputing over terms has a point where it ceases to be productive. This completely derailed the fact that what we are undergoing is strikingly similar to the Cultural Revolution in China, which is the point. And he said clarity is important, lest counter-revolutionaries indulge the fantasy that things will change if only they elect the people who aren't communists or get the schools to stop teaching a left-wing curriculum. That's a key point, because what he's emphasizing here is that we've become trapped in a dialectic. Communism and capitalism are partners in this dialectic that are ultimately working, synthesizing to the point of atheist technocracy. That's the end point of both capitalism and communism. So if you're placing your hopes and dreams in the market, you're advocating free markets, and your level of analysis says, well, where this went wrong was when it ceased to be a free market. And if we could just return to the state of a free market where everybody's able to just voluntarily, freely interact together, then everything will be all hunky-dory. You're falling right into the same trap. It was that precise mentality that led us to this point. And trying to go back to it will just get us right to this point again. Ultimately, capitalism and communism are two wings of liberalism. And liberalism is the end point of liberalism is like the Benthamite panopticon. It's an atheist technocracy. And again, atheism, I guess maybe not again, I don't know if I've said this before, but atheism ultimately is worship of a god. But it's not explicit worship of a god. It's inadvertent or it's worshiping a god without realizing it, because there are gods who will very happily step in and accept your worship in the name of rationality and reason. So we've touched on this in the past when we talked about the whole World Economic Forum, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, which he has the screenshot of it down here. And the people who don't realize this, who haven't recognized this, this dialectic, who haven't recognized that that capitalism is just communism under a different name, and I mean communism is just capitalism under a different name. You're being sucked into a machine that's going to grind you down and spit you out. It's going to tell you lots of things that you want to hear, make you feel like you're you're being pandered to, but ultimately it's going the same direction. It's all headed in the same place. And ultimately, what we're going to see is we're moving forward. We've started calling this months ago. Ultimately, there's going to be rhetoric talking about the corruption, or our suspicion, at least my suspicion, is that it's going to be focused on like government just being too corrupt. Government's been taken over by white supremacists or white nationalists. We just can't trust the government. The government's not going to do it anymore. It's too slow and too inefficient. We need big corporations to step up and do their part. More than just pay their fair share, they need to do their part in making the world a better place, in combating climate change, and combating COVID, and combating whatever the enemy du jour is. And libertarians are going to get sucked right into that. Conservatives too. They're going to get pulled right into that, endorsing the privatization of government, which is going to be the ultimate tyranny. Because now you're going to have privatized government that doesn't even have the pretense of you having any sort of rights. That doesn't even have the pretense of being responsive to you in any way. You can say all you want about, competition, yada, yada, yada. But ultimately, you're going up against the forces that determine who the competitors are. The forces that use the government because it's there, who created the government to use. But if you take the government away from them, they'll create a different thing. This is why the whole end the Fed movement is so retarded. If you end the Fed, the people who created the Fed are just going to create something different. The Fed is not the source of the problem. The Fed is the tool. Ultimately, part of the liberal notion, like I said before, is that we're going to come up with a solution that can be applied universally. That we're going to save the world. We're going to come up with just the right revolutionary idea that's going to sweep the world, and everybody's going to buy into our notion, and it's going to be Ron Paul Revolution 2.0, or whatever the thing is, whatever the universalist notion you live under, whether implicitly or explicitly. It's all bait. It's all bait to get you to feed into this dialectic. Ultimately, if you want liberty, you have to create your own. And that starts with your own communities. That starts with your own families. That starts with your own life. That starts with you taking control of what you can take control of. You can't take control of the federal government. You can't take control of the Fed. You can't take control of the World Economic Forum. You can't take control of any of these things. Most people that talk about this can't even take control of themselves. But they want to spend all this time talking about taking
room.
Yeah. They want to spend all this time talking about how they're going to save the world, how they've got the best ideas, and if everybody would just listen to our ideas, if everyone just realized that I already figured everything out, then the world would be a great place. It just doesn't work that way. You have to engage with the world that is, not the hypothetical world of theory in your head. There was a let me see if I can find this quote. Oh yeah, another one here. Another quote here from our dear friend Murray Rothbard, posted by our even dearer friend Tho Bishop. He quote tweeted Dave's thing about he said, "I don't understand why some libertarians have so much trouble with this stuff. Privatization is ideal, but if there's a public playground, I'd prefer it not be filled with homeless drug addicts when I bring my daughter there." Here's a quote here from Murray Rothbard. He says, "Libertarians who might be sound in the remote reaches of high theory are so devoid of common sense and out of touch with the concerns of real people that they unfortunately wind up discrediting both themselves and libertarian theory itself." Now, personally, I'm actually a big fan of people discrediting libertarian theory at this point. I say that partially tongue in cheek, but libertarianism, whether it's intended to be or not, ultimately functions as a psyop. It's sucking people into a pseudo solution that is preaching a false gospel. It's built on the outlines of the actual capital G gospel, but it passes itself off as like an updated or new and improved or more universally applicable gospel. One that, oh, you don't have to be a Christian to understand how to don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. So it's this dumbed down thing that we can tell everybody else, just don't hurt people and don't take their stuff and life will be good. When you put it that way, like libertarians will like, they'll re at me saying that. But that is the essence of the message. That we just have to tell people not to hurt people and not take their stuff. If we just do that, then everything will be great. And we'll come up with a bunch of elaborate theoretical, philosophical arguments to make it seem more complex than it really is. But that's at the basis, that's what it is. Yeah, it's very simple. Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. Even a child understands it. If it's so simple, then why does nobody do it? Why is it so difficult to get people to buy into such a simple idea? Well, maybe because it's more complicated. And maybe because they don't have an incentive to. As our good friend Populib says, people behave their incentives. And until you can change that incentive structure, until you can provide people with a better incentive, a greater incentive, a higher incentive, they're going to continue behaving their incentives no matter how many fancy arguments you give them. Ultimately, if you want people to change their behavior, you have to start by changing your own. And that segues us into the last part of the show today. But first of all, the worst thing about capitalism is the taxes. And if taxation is getting to you, then we have a solution for you, potentially. Calling all Hoppians, Praxians, and fans of late Rothbard. Mises GOP is here, and we need recruits for Hoppa's What Must Be Done strategy to set out taking over local governments, nullifying the COVID regime, and starting us down the path to a private property society with the anti-tax. Mises GOP needs candidates with good moral character in red areas of red states to step forward and answer our call to run. If you're someone who's interested in supporting candidates with good moral character, so there's two calls here. One of them is if you are of good moral character and you're in a red area in a red state, then you can run for local government. You can run for local office and potentially make a difference. Or if you just want to support someone, if you're interested in supporting someone, maybe you're not of good moral character, but you want to support someone who is. So if you're interested in supporting candidates with good moral character or in supporting the anti-tax paradigm and interested in supporting the nullification of the COVID regime, then please become a monthly donor to Mises GOP today. No amount is too small. If you want to, but make sure it's big enough that because if you go use our link and you go sign up, then we get a cut of it. We make money off of you going and signing up here. So don't do too small of an amount because we want to make money off of reading our ads on our show.
From the copy, there is an amount that is too small.
Yeah. But seriously, he says, if you want to give a one-time donation, we ask that you break it into 12 equal parts as this aids in our planning for the future. So if you're interested, then just go visit the link that's in the description on this video, or if you're listening to the audio later, there'll be a link in the show notes or the description there. You can go click that link. You can also go to, I need to write this down and make sure I get the right. I can never remember exactly what the Twitter handle is. It's either Mises GOP or GOP Mises. I think it's GOP Mises. Yes, go to GOP Mises on Twitter, and you can follow the Republican Party Mises Caucus there. This is obviously our good friend Poppy Libs, and he's doing very good work. We, in general, I find local politics to be mind-numbingly boring. It's just not interesting to me at all. I don't personally want to be involved in it, but I want people who are good people, who are doing good things, to be involved in it, and I want to support them.
I want
That's
to live
why,
in a place where the police will be inclined to remove the vagrants.
right. And if they're not, I want them to be replaced by people who will. And then if you can get a fantastic little project like the anti-tax going somewhere, and start to see how that's going to run its course, then even better. I think there's a big tendency of people to kind of see themselves as like we're living. This comes from Protestantism. I think that, look, we're living in the end times, and it's kind of like, oh, we need to, the end of the world is nigh, and we need to rally up this big movement and go throw ourselves on the ramparts of the regime and martyr ourselves for the cause. And if you're inclined that way, then you know what, knock yourself out. I'm not gonna try to talk you out of it anymore. But there's a chance that we're at the end of the world, and if there is, then it doesn't really matter what we do. If we're not, if we're going to be here a while longer, which I suspect we are, then there's as this regime collapses, something's going to replace it. And if we can engineer a solution that can change the incentive structure of whatever comes out of the ashes of the regime, then I want to be a part of that. And I want to help support the people who are doing that. Ultimately, if you live on the coasts, or you live in a liberal urban center and you don't get out very much, I'd encourage you to go drive across the country. Just drive across a few states. You'll be surprised at how huge this country is, speaking of the United States, and how different the rural areas are than the urban areas. There's still a lot to fight for and a lot to preserve, and especially in local communities. You can make a few people who consolidate their efforts and work smartly can make a really big difference in the local areas. And that's why we're proud to support Mises GOP, and we hope that you guys will as well. So, oh man, I just realized that my comments weren't updating. I was like, man, everybody's gotten really quiet. And then nope, there's a whole bunch of comments here. Like I said before, I'll catch up on what you guys are talking about here. I'll go back through and read them later on. But so we titled this show "The Last Time We Make Fun of Libertarians," maybe. And
I got a private message from somebody that if it's the last time we make fun of libertarians, he's going to revoke his helicopter pilot status.
Fair. Well, part of the reason that maybe is in there is because we don't necessarily trust ourselves, and we can't hold ourselves to it. So we're not going to make any promises that are too hard and fast. But Stephen and I had a little conversation this last week, and kind of had a like a what are we doing? Like what's the whole purpose of all this? Why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? And both of us it turns out we're basically on the same page, that we found ourselves in kind of we fell into this loop of showing up and just kind of treating this show like a platform. I'll say this is more me than Steven. Just treating this show like a platform for arguing about how stupid the LP is and how stupid people who are trying to get into it, and this whole liberty scene. And it's gotten to where both of us have been feeling like we need to take a shower after we finish talking about it. It's something that we're close to. So that's where the maybe comes from. Like, it's hard for us to completely disentangle ourselves from it. But ultimately, the world doesn't need another podcast talking about niche libertarian theory and LP drama and squabbles. I've said this before, that I've been becoming more and more keenly aware of the fact that I am doing this kind of meta thing where I'm getting really autistically bogged down, or really bogged down in autistically trying to rationalize with people that they shouldn't get bogged down in autistically trying to rationalize and persuade people that there are better things that we can focus on, better things we can spend our time on. And when we first started doing this show in the first place, we were interested in things that were a lot more than just the LP and libertarian politics. There's a lot more philosophy, and even if we're talking politics, there's a lot more political. There's political subjects that are a lot more interesting that we're very interested in, and more broadly speaking, the subjects that I'm really most interested in are, you could probably sum them up very easily by saying Graham Hancock. I tweeted something yesterday. I said that I've been realizing more and more that I need to be talking to people about Graham Hancock more. And I got a very, very good response from that, which just affirmed to me that that's true. Ultimately, when we first started doing this show, I had we had this kind of project that we toyed with, and I don't know if we're ever going to actually get around to that specific project, but we might kind of dance around the edges of it, which is, everyone knows the saying that the victors write the history books. So the history that all of us learned is the history of Tom Woods' 3x5 card of allowable opinion that delivers a very particular narrative about what has happened in the past and what got us to where we are today and why. And from within that, then there's some very specific dogmas that we are supposed to believe, and that we are supposed to behave as if are true. And as you start studying, some people might call it like alternative history. To me, it's just history. Like calling it alternative history is sort of like calling it the mainstream media. It gives the thing that you're differentiating from too much credence. It treats it as credible when it's not. And this mashes up a lot with what I've been learning a lot lately with orthodoxy. So as we go forward, you guys can expect us to kind of broaden our focus and talk about things outside the realm of what we've spent a lot of our time talking about lately. And I think it's going to be very productive. I think that there's a lot of value that we can generate there. And for me, really, it's not, I know some things, but I don't know a lot. I don't know most things. I just know that there's a lot of stuff I don't know. And I want to find those things out. And I like the idea of having this show as a like a platform or an incentive for studying and learning those things. There's a lot of people that I want to talk to who are experts. I think probably the very front of that list right now is probably Randall Carlson, and then Randall Carlson and Jay Dyer are probably the two people that are really holding my attention the most right now. And so yeah, I think that you guys can expect us to have a lot very different content going forward. The history and esoterica and religion and philosophy and stuff, that's really my forte. That's the stuff that really gets me going. Then Steven has a focus as well that he's really been thinking about and been passionate about lately that he was telling me about. And go ahead and tell people what you were thinking.
I had kind of, this is going to be kind of weird. I thought we had agreed that we were going to host a series of LP centered debates. And the first of which was going to be that the resolution that Murray Rothbard preferred oatmeal raisin cookies. That position would be held by Angela McArdle. And then Tho Bishop was going to come on and say that he was a chocolate chip guy from his readings. This is not the announcement that I thought.
You cannot make me side with Angela McArdle. That is a party foul.
Oh boy. Yeah, no, that's yeah, I realized that a lot of people were kind of seem to be inspired by like the sort of personal development aspects of some of the guests that we've had or the discussions that we've had. And yeah, I think that might be my my interest in some things that some experiences that I've had, some people that I know, and some people I'd like to bring on to sort of talk about some of the benefits. I wouldn't have expected that Joshua, raw milk, and raw meat guy, was going to get the pop that he did from people and be so inspiring. I'm glad that he was. But when I saw that, it made me think. It's like, I know some interesting people that we might want to talk to. So yeah, I think it's just like kind of like looking at the show as like a liberty or political show, and they also do all this other peripheral stuff that people seem to dig. I think we'll reach out towards the peripheral stuff, quote unquote, and bring it more towards the center of the show. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's just like it's inseparable, like Matthew's saying here, from like the politics and current events. But I think I think we're also not going to put ourselves in a box, or if we do, we're going to take complete liberty to just have like the next like the next 6 episodes just be reading human action from cover to cover. Like, why not? We'll do whatever we want.
That reading human action would be a pretty good way to say fuck the LP, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, and just and if you want to avoid Rothbardian cookie debates, you just better keep buying that goddamn Paloma Verde, people. PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Use promo code King.
www.nomadnetwork.app/King.
Yes. And popular.liberty/GOP Mises Caucus. www.king. I believe that's the URL for that.
Real quick, I just had a couple comments here I wanted to highlight that let me see here. Juan said that labor today isn't as more efficient as Carlos had said that the development of capital equipment and usage of it to make labor more efficient is a characteristic of capitalism I agree with. And Juan said, one piece of data you might not have heard of, labor isn't as more efficient as you may think. In 1400 AD in France, Spain, and Italy, the average peasant worked 3 months per year. Whenever you think of the higher level of productivity in modern capitalism, remember that we now work 11 and a half months of the year.
And the other thing too is, I don't know, it's very, like, I switched over from the Evola book that I'd been working through to Managerial Revolution just like yesterday. And like it's tying in with all these like concepts that we were talking about today. But one of the things is that he's talking about how basically with capitalism you're forced to turn a profit, and as soon as there's not growth and as soon as there's not profit, it's when the state is able to step in. And so it's just that like pressure of like constant growth inevitably will like drive a company to be put in a position where the state almost has to take it over. And so it's kind of like it kind of ties in with the capitalism communism discussion that was happening just mere moments ago. But yeah, I was listening to you and I was thinking about the chapters in that book. That it's just like that book just has point after point after point after point that just and then you kind of go back and it's like this was written in what, the 30s, and it just has me, as I'm listening to it, I'm just like, I can't wait to re-listen to this.
It's all inextricable too from the Protestant work ethic, to tie it into the religious side of things. The Protestant work ethic, which is born out of Puritanism, which all of these things too are influenced by the Whig view of history, and there's kind of this notion that there's perpetual growth and there's always upward trajectory, and that's what takes you from working 3 months out of the year to working 11 and a half months out of the year. Suppose like now we're supposedly not peasants any longer, but there was a trade-off. There was a trade-off that was given from going from the feudal system to the capitalist system. Has been framed to us as an upgrade, because of course it has, because the people that are framing it to us are the people who are invested in the capitalist system. But here's your like untold history. Like Juan points out here, that's not always true. That's not always necessarily true. And there's a lot of these things that have been baked into us that are just kind of like latently there, and we don't even realize it. Just assumptions that are built into us. And there's more to life than production, than being permanently and not necessarily production, market production. You can be productive in ways that are not necessarily tied into the market unless you are part of a society that sees human beings as ultimately economic agents. You can see this as well in libertarianism with the idea that economics is the be all end all. Human beings are not fundamentally economic actors. Human beings are fundamentally spiritual actors. And economic activity can be spiritually beneficial, but not economic activity for its own sake. Economic activity for its own sake is ultimately like a form of idolatry. It's a hyper materialism that has had a really corrosive effect on society spiritually. And then you look at, for example, we have all these supply chain issues that are happening now. Well, a lot of this is because these global supply networks have had every last little bit of inefficiency flogged out of them. They've been refined down to a knife's edge margin. And then all you get is a little bit of disruption, and you get this cascading effect of disastrous consequences, where the whole supply chain starts falling apart. And that's not saying that the whole COVID thing was just a small thing. It would have upset a lot of supply chains, but I'm talking about ultimate priorities. And part of advocating for treating the free market as a highest end or a highest goal, deifying it in the way that liberals, in particular libertarians, have, is that ultimately you are only focused on the material, productive, commercial side of humanity, and you lose a lot of what it means to be human. And ultimately, you tie this in. I mean, we could do an entire year's worth of podcasts on the latent Satanism in liberalism, and I'm sure we will do lots of podcasts on that. But ultimately, if you're viewing human beings as economic actors, then don't be disappointed when the economic system goes to shit, because human beings are not fundamentally economic actors. So this emphasis on personal development, I think, is it's going to be very welcome. It's going to be very welcome for me. It's something that I need desperately. I need to be a lot better than I am, and doing the show and having this emphasis is going to be very good. It'll help hold me accountable. And ultimately, I was just listening to a really, really interesting conversation on the meaning crisis it was on Jordan Peterson's channel. It was Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Pajot, Bishop Barron, and John Vervaeke. And one thing they were talking about at the very end was something that I'd be interested in learning more about. It was the idea of that there's I can't remember the guy's name. There's a philosopher who has been trying to revive this aspect of Platonism, of Plato, where philosophy is not just like a practice that you engage in, that you pick up and set down. And this is, again, is a product of liberal commercialism. It just commercializes everything and treats philosophy like something that you can do a la carte, where really philosophy is a lifestyle. Philosophy and religion are ultimately, you're engaged in the same process, trying to separate them out and treat these as a la carte things that you can just get a piece here and a piece there and a piece there. This is a product of the commercialized liberal mind rot that we have. Ultimately, philosophy has to be an entire life experience. It innervates everything that you do. Your entire life is a practice of philosophy. So that's going to be a big focus with us here going forward. That this isn't just something that you just engage with for kind of a interesting hobby, or just for like one little niche subject. This is an entire life discipline that ranges from accumulating knowledge to understand the context of who you are and where you are and why, and learning from the past, learning from these different disciplines and different cultures and different civilizations that existed, and learning why they collapsed and how, and enabling you to understand the world around you better, to be able to predict the future better. And at the same time, that's on the macro level. On the micro level, being able to take care of your own body, whether it's fitness or diet, or Josh came on and he talked about raw milk and raw meat. And you can't divorce the practice of the food that you eat from the religious and philosophical beliefs that you hold. They're not separable.
I was thinking that just the other day, just like, everyone's very familiar with the phrase "you are what you eat."
Yes.
But like, and I was thinking about how, it kind of came with like this idea of, I think I was going through something and I saw the word like content. And I was thinking about how much I hate the word content. And what I really hate is the phrase consume content. I cannot stand that phrase, but it's real. Like you are in fact consuming things. And just the more you kind of like look at human beings as really, despite whatever we want to think of ourselves, we kind of are just empty vessels, And so like it is a matter of, kind of what you put in your body in any sense, whether it's what you put in your ears and into your mind and into your, it's that you are going to, like, how you comport yourself in the world is going to be like a direct result of that. And I just know that like there are periods of time where like I just wanted to like listen to like comedy. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to listen to like dumb comedy and like zone out. And I like felt worse, I was probably acted worse. I was just listening to like terrible like comedy all the time. And when I could snap out of it, is when, I started at least balancing out with like, other materials, reading more, or, just doing other things, with my idle time. And I knew that like whenever I could like kind of break out of that, I like that I would experience a benefit from it. It's the same thing with like, it's just as like, of a dramatic result, when you can kind of commit to the idea of like cooking for yourself and like making sure the food that you cook for yourself is like higher quality, and you'll feel better. But it's the same thing with the ideas that you put in your head.
If you eat shitty food, you'll think shitty thoughts. And if you think shitty thoughts, then you'll do shitty things. And if you do shitty things, it'll make you a shitty person. Those things are all inseparable from each other. And ultimately, one thing I wanted to do before we finished up here, I wanted to reread. Shout out Clockwork Industries, shout out Jim, Manufacturing Liberty, however, whatever term he's going by. He's been here in the chat here, and he's part of our supporting listeners group. And he's been a part of the show from early on. He left this comment a long time ago, and it's been my pinned thread, or been my pinned tweet ever since. He says, unless you have the power to take over the system, which none of us do, you gain power through individual responsibility, building wealth, power, and influence, preferably in a method you enjoy, then helping others do the same thing, family, friends, and build communities to prop each other up to weather the coming storm and collapse. Build autonomy, practice agorism when applicable, learn self-sufficiency and practical skills, prepare for the worst, and hope for the best. You have to build security inside the system so that when it falls, you can remain and rise from it. Ultimately, people have asked before what it means to be king pilled, or what's the king pill? What is for the real king pill show? What does that mean? What does it mean to be king pilled? And ultimately, to be king pilled is to recognize that kingship is an inherent part of human society, and that we are all called to be kings. We are called by the King of Kings to be kings, to become kings of our own lifestyle, to become kings of our own household, and to act that way, to act as if we are kings. Every society has will have a natural aristocracy, and the direction of that society will be determined by its elites. This is just inevitable. You cannot remove this fact. It's going to be present in every single organization of humans. There's always going to be a fraction of elite people who will direct the rest of the society. And if you want your society to go a different direction, you can either sit around and complain that the elites aren't good enough, or you can get to work creating better elites. And I think ultimately that's the goal of our show, is to encourage people to engage in the process of creating a better elite class by starting with themselves and by understanding, as you said a minute ago, that we are empty vessels naturally. And if you think you aren't worshiping something, you are. Your thoughts don't you are not the generator of your thoughts. Thoughts, you can hear people say this. People like, "Oh, this thought came to me." Or like inspiration is something, I was just sitting there and all of a sudden this thought popped into my head. That thought came from somewhere. And the materialist will say, oh, it's just like juices moving around in your brain and just randomly spontaneously generating something. Okay, sure. If you want to believe that, then you go away. Your thoughts come to you because they're put there. And you can determine who will put thoughts in your head based on the environment that you surround yourself with. And that environment includes what you put in your body, what you put in your mind. Ultimately, your mind is a radio receiver that's going to be tuned into a signal. And if you tune it into a shitty signal, you're going to have a shitty life. So to be king pilled means to tune your mind to the king, and then to treat your life as a king would, to take mastery, to take control over your environment, over your behavior, your actions, what you eat, what you do, what you believe, and to be constantly improving yourself, constantly working to make yourself better and to make your communities better around you. And so some of this, sometimes that involves focusing on your diet and your exercise, your fitness, your actual the on the micro scale, your physical practices that you partake in. And sometimes it involves knowledge and education and understanding philosophy and religion and history. And so we're gonna be encompassing all of that within this show going forward, but specifically with a focus toward continually taking the king pill every day and being one of the king pilled. How's that for rounding it out? Juan says to be king pilled is to not be gay. Yeah, you could just put it in one sentence as well. All right, guys. Well, we'd planned on going for an hour today, and we're at an hour and 57 minutes. So I think that there are two constants about, or at least two constants about the Real King Pill show. One is that we will always start later than we anticipate, and the other is that we will always end later than we anticipate. But hopefully the content was good. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. The comments have been popping. We appreciate you guys. We enjoy doing this. We enjoy talking to you, and we appreciate you guys contributing to us the way that you do. Remember, supporting listeners group is subscribestar.com/kingpilled. You can go join the Discord, and you can enjoy the comments going on in there. We have a book club, and the three books that we've been doing right now are Render Unto Caesar by Venermani, and Why Liberalism Failed by, I think it's by Patrick Deneen, and then The Language of Creation by Matthew Pajot. And we're going to be doing a get together and discussing everything at some point in December. And then we're going to be starting on some new books. And I know I can't remember exactly which books we've settled on that we're going to do, but I know one of them is going to be Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock. So we're probably going to start going on a Graham Hancock kick here pretty soon. And hopefully I can get Randall Carlson on to talk, and we can talk about some rocks. The dear beloved man loves to talk about some rocks, and he's also a Freemason and an ANCAP. And he has a very, very interesting perspective on the world with regard to catastrophism and ancient societies and all that sort of thing. So we've got good stuff coming down the pike. It's been good to be here with you guys today. Stephen, you have anything else you want to say?
Yes, be sure to tune in to our next show where we'll have Jack Lloyd on the show.
Yeah, right.